All right. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I mentioned into the message, just stay muted. You can be on video if you'd like. It's up to you, or you can just stay off video. And we're gonna have a bunch of people emitting in right now, so just bear with me for a little bit as we get people into the class. Stay muted. Video can be on or off. That's up to you. I am recording this for hopefully new Patreons that'll join down the road. I'll be posting this on the Patreon page as well as the YouTube page that I have. So hopefully this will be a good video and organized in a good way so you can understand everything. Any questions you have, if you don't mind writing them down at home and then like emailing me, or on the Patreon website, there's the message that you can send me any questions at any time, by the way. But in regards to this lesson, just let me know. And for any reason, any volume issues, you can message me in the Zoom message, but hopefully you can hear me just fine. I'm going to be demonstrating some things on the trumpet as well through my mic. So if you can't hear that, let me know. Okay, I'm super excited. I have a lot to cover, and I finally upgraded on my Zoom, just so you know. So I think I have a full hour with this. So hopefully I can get everything in. We are going to talk about the dominant bebop scale and the major bebop scale. And we're going to talk about how to practice them and then how to combine them seamlessly together to form some really nice bebop phrases that will fit over chord progressions, very common chord progressions like 2-5-1s. If you're in a funk band, dominant bebop is really nice to be able to play over just one long chord as well. And this can be used in modal tunes as well. What I'm going to do is explain how to practice the scales first and use some arpeggios and enclosures on them. And then I'm going to show you some ways to connect. So I'm going to get started. There might be a few other people that join, and I'll just have to admit them in as they come in. So the first thing is I'm going to explain what makes a bebop scale and why we do this. The first thing is dominant or major bebop. What we're going to be doing today is going to be a eighth note type of scale, just so you know. Of course, you can practice it slow. It's going to feel like you're playing quarter notes or half notes. That's totally fine. But keep in mind, the scale is really meant to be played in eighth notes. And here's why. Both the dominant bebop scale and major bebop scale, we add a note to the scale. Let me just repeat that. For both dominant and major bebop scale, we're adding notes to the scale. And here's why. For dominant bebop scale, I'll speak in my G7. I'm going to add the raised seventh, or we can call it the sharp seventh. So in a dominant scale, not bebop, but dominant scale, we have a flatted seventh. We just add the sharp seventh or raised seventh. And for major bebop, it would be, instead of just a major scale in C major, let's say, we would add a flatted sixth to that scale. Now here's why. When we add the chromatic note in there, in both the scales, what happens is, as you play this scale descending in eighth notes, you will land on the beat of the chord tones that you want to emphasize. So for an example, in G7, the chord tones is 1, 3, 5, 7 of G7, which is G, B, D, and F. For us to land on the beat of those chord tones, we have to add a chromatic note to make that happen. For an example, G7 going down, G, F sharp, F. Well, G would be the downbeat, F sharp is an upbeat, F is the downbeat, E is an upbeat, D is the downbeat, C is an upbeat, B is the downbeat, A is an upbeat, G is the downbeat, and we're back, we're good to go. For C major, bebop scale, C, A, G, E are the chord tones that we're going to land on, and make sure those are on the beat. Not the seventh of all things you would think, right? C major seventh. Well, in our C major bebop scale, the chord tones are the 1, 3, 5, and 6. Okay, now all this is going to sound and look better as you're seeing a sheet that I'll be sharing to you right now. So real quick, I'm trying something new. I'm going to share all the sheets so I can switch from one page to the next. So once I put this on the screen, if it doesn't work, please someone maybe send a message to me. So I'm going to close out the box here. Okay, so if I switch pages, it should go to another page, a different formula of notes. So I'm going to do that again. And if it's not doing that, please tell me. You don't have to if it is already. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our dominant scale, and I'm going to teach you how to make sure you understand how to play the scale descending on all the scale degrees. So on your page right now, sharing, you should see, and I'm going to enlarge it a little bit, dominant bebop scale, descend on all scale degrees. If you don't see that, please let me know. Okay. This is one of the most important rules and practices that you have to do, okay, to make everything that we do in the end make sense. If you only practice starting on the 1, for example, you're missing out on all the different options you'll have eventually when you learn how to descend on the scale on all scale degrees. Now, I keep saying descend because the scale for the dominant bebop scale and the major bebop scale really have a pole that goes down. It sounds better to go down the scale than going up. I have heard people play the scale going up. It just does not do it for me, so I don't teach it that way. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take G7. And by the way, I'm in my key. As a trumpet player, I'm going to play in my key. It's going to make my life easier to teach today. So if you're in concert pitch, it would actually be F7. If you're an E flat instrument, you'll be in D7. Okay. So for G7, notice on the 1, we go down the scale, and you see the added major 7th there. Otherwise, if I didn't have that, it would just be a dominant scale, not bebop scale. So notice they're all eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? I'm just adding the note just so you can play all the way through. So I'm going to demonstrate that starting on the 1. Oh, notice someone's coming in. Like I mentioned, there'll be a couple people probably popping in. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the scale descending down from the 1. Simple, okay? Practice playing the scale in as many octaves that you can play on your instrument. Okay, so that's a good first start, just practicing the scale starting on the 1. Get used to adding that major 7th in there. Don't worry about your articulation so much. I always tell students to keep things straight. I'm slurring, okay? I'm not tonning, and I would try to keep it smooth and straight on my eighth notes. Eventually, when you feel comfortable, you can start to emphasize just a few upbeats at some point, okay? All right, the next step is starting on the 7th. It's very important, like I said, to make sure you can plan every scale degree and understand how that works. On the 7th, we don't have to change anything about the scale. We just start on the 7th. Notice I'm saying the 7th, not the major 7th, because the major 7th is just a passing tone. That's all you have to treat it as. So we would never start on that. So the 7th is F of G7, and I'm going to go all the way down an octave so I can play that chromatic into that. Okay. I don't have to do anything different to that scale. All right. Now, if I go to the 6th, notice I'm adding something different within the scale. There are 3 scale degrees, which I have to change to make sure that I'm landing on the beat for the chord tones. If I started on the 6 and I didn't add anything after this note, I would be off on my downbeats. So I have to add a chromatic note on the 6, after the 6, I should say. So notice I play E flat. And then my downbeat is the 5th, which I'm back on track now. So that's starting on the 6, adding a chromatic note down. Okay, so that's kind of a special rule to know what to do on the 6 of the dominant bebop scale. Add a chromatic note right after it. All right, going on to the 5th. I take the 5th, I don't have to do anything. Most of the, I should say all the chord tones that I'm emphasizing, the 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the G7, I don't have to change the scale. So here's the 5th going down. All right. Now, notice I'm going to start on the 4th, and there's something different here. I have a rhythm here. Here's why. Here's a special thing about the 4th. I have a half step. If I start on the 4th of G7, that's C down to B, I'm off track already because the B is the 3rd, and that would be an upbeat if I played that normal. So I have to change this rhythmically on the 4th. And this is a good rhythm to know. It's a triplet, and I'm playing, I could play any note between the 2 notes here, but it just makes sense to stay within the G7. So I'm going to start on C and go C up to D and back to C in an 8th note triplet. And then I'm back on track playing on the 3rd down on the downbeat. Take a listen. There are other rhythms you can do. An example could be an 8th note and 2/16ths. And that would sound like this. Okay. Now, pick one and stay with it for a little bit so you get comfortable. Okay. All right. Next one on the 3rd. You don't have to do anything. It's a chord tone that we know, and it doesn't change the scale in any way. Again, I'm slurring, descending, and I'm not emphasizing anything. I'm just keeping them straight. It's a good way to practice. Last but not least, on the 2nd, we could call it the 9th if you'd like. Same thing. On the 2nd here, I have to do something special again. I have to add a chromatic note on the next note. Why? If I didn't, I would be off with being on the beat of my chord tones again. So I have to get back on. So I play a chromatic note on the 2nd note, and notice then beat 2 is the G, which is on the beat now. So I'm back on track. So for the 2nd, here it sounds like this. Okay, a quick recap. On G7 dominant bebop scale, on the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, I don't have to change the scale in any way. I just go down the scale, still adding my major 7th, and I still play the flat 7th. All good to go. On the 6, I have to add a special note after that to get back on track. On the 4th, I have to have a rhythm to get back on the track of playing on the beat. And on the 2nd, I have to add a chromatic note to get back on the beat. So practice all of them. And I'm just going to do that real quick, starting on the 1. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Practice that. It's a huge thing to understand the rules of that, and it will do you so good in the long run because you'll understand how to play on all scale degrees of the G7 or dominant bebop scale. It doesn't matter what key we do, right? We should be play it in all keys. Okay, I'm moving on. Bear with me. I'm going to skip around to get, yep, there we go, right next to her. So if I switched, you should see a different page. Hopefully that's working. Okay, now within the dominant bebop scale, there are arpeggios. Notice we've been descending, going down, and I want to go back up somehow. I want to get back up to the scale so I can go down the scale and go back up. To go up, I play arpeggios or first inverted arpeggios or enclosures. So these are kind of special moments here. And on the dominant bebop scale, we're going to deal with the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. And we're going to build arpeggios off of the 3rd, the 5th, or the 7th. By the way, arpeggios, they're 4 notes built in thirds going up, okay, within the dominant scale. So for an example, if I started on the 3rd of G7, that would be B. And to build an arpeggio, skip to a 3rd from there, from B would be to D. A 3rd from D up is F, and a 3rd up from F is A. And that sounds like this. So make sure you practice that. Understand the arpeggio of the 3rd of the dominant bebop scale, and in this case in G7. Okay, now practice playing your scale degree, any one, going down the scale to the 3rd and go up the arpeggio. So let's start with starting on the 1, and I'm going to go down from the 1 bebop scale, and I'm going to go to the 3rd. When I get to the 3rd, I'm going to go up the arpeggio. Take a listen. Again, these are all 8th notes. All of a sudden, my lines are starting to get longer. Now, in this case, I can repeat that. I can keep doing that. After my arpeggio, I have to go down. So the next note would be G again. So I'm going to just repeat it like a loop. Okay. Now, remember, you can start on any scale degree of the scale and go to the 3rd arpeggio. So I'll give you an example on one. I'm going to start on, how about I'll start on the 2nd. And I'm going to go down the 2nd. Remember my rule for the 2nd, I have to add a chromatic note, and then I'm going to go all the way down the scale to the 3rd. That sounds like this. Nice. I'll do one more. I'm going to start on the 6th. Remember, I have to add a chromatic note after the 6th going down the scale. I'll go down to the 3rd and go up the arpeggio. Now, I took that up an octave. I could play it down. Make sure you practice all different octaves that you can play on your instrument. Okay, moving on. There's another arpeggio to learn, the 5th. So you take the 5th of G, which is D, and you build your arpeggio off of that. Remember, it's 4 notes going up in thirds. So if I started on the 5th of G, that's D, go up a 3rd, that's F, go up a 3rd, that's A, go up a 3rd, that's C. That sounds like this. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second and just kind of remind you on a very important part of this. So far, I've been saying this is in the key of G7, dominant, right? The 5 chord. Well, I just played that arpeggio starting on D and I went D, F, A, C. That's just outlining D minor. So it's a good point to show you that everything we play right now in dominant will fit over minor, the 2 chord. So this everything that we play today will fit in the D minor in G7. G7 and D minor to me are the same. So that's a lot of material now and vocabulary you can apply into minor chords as well. Okay, so I'm going to start on a scale degree, go down to the 5th and go up my arpeggio, just like I did with the other arpeggio. So how about this time I start on the 4th of G7, and that I have to remind myself I got to play that rhythm again. And I'm going to go down to the 5th and go up the arpeggio. Sounds pretty good. Okay, now, and I won't show any more examples. I need to get through all this. So I'm going to go on to the 7th arpeggio, and that is in G7, F. Remember, it's not F sharp. Why? That F sharp's just a passing tone. That's all it is. It's just an added note. So F is really within the dominant scale. I'm going to approach my arpeggio going up in thirds. So F to A to C, C to E. All right, listen to that. So I'll start on, how about I just start on the 1? And it's going to happen right away. If I go on the 1, I'll go down to the 7th. How about I start on the 5th of the scale, going down to the 7th and go up the arpeggio. All right, moving on. So those were all my arpeggios going up, and I practiced with my descending scale on all scale degrees to those arpeggios. Now, the next thing is to learn those arpeggios in the first inverted arpeggio, I call it. So that all that is just taking the first note, and notice on the second half of the sheet, and it's just playing it up an octave. That's all it's doing. It's not changing any of the notes that we played just a second ago on the arpeggios. It doesn't change. It's just playing the note up an octave. And that actually increases the phrasing to move a little bit more and allows some movement in your phrasing. So take a listen to what that sounds like on the 7th. I'll play it the normal way, going up. Now listen to it with the first note up an octave. So let's say I started on the 1 again and I went down to the 7th right away and I inverted first inversion on the arpeggio. Okay, going on to the 5th. Instead of going up like this, I take that first note up an octave. All right, how about I start on the 6th of G7 and I go right away into the 5th and invert. How about I start on the 1 and go to the 5th? Okay. Now, last one is on the 3rd. Instead of my first frac for the morning here. All right, going up, that's how it sounds. Now, in first inverted arpeggio. How about I start on the 1 again, all the way down to the 3rd, and I invert that. All right, great way to practice, just going down the scale and play the arpeggio or the first inverted arpeggio. Last but not least is the enclosure to the 3rd. Okay, so this is a kind of a unique thing that can cause a twist and turn into the scale. So the enclosure to the 3rd, notice to get to the 3rd of G7, which is B, I'm going to play down a whole step and chromatically up. So if I were going down the scale of 1, on G7. I'm going to go all the way down, and before I play the third, I have to play A sharp, B. I'll play it super slow so you can hear it. Notice I don't go to the third. I have to play a whole step before that. So really, technically, the note before A would be the fourth, which is C in G7. So I'm going down the scale to the fourth, coming back down a whole step before the third. So take a listen to that one more time. Okay, now that adds a lot. Trust me, as we start to put this all together in a second, you're going to hear how that can put a nice little turn, we call it, or enclosure, and that will really help you develop some nice phrasing with this. Okay, I know I ran through that quite a bit, but fast, so I just want to show you now what you would do with all of that knowledge. Remember, we're descending on all the scale degrees. We're ascending on the arpeggios and our first inverted arpeggios, and now we have an enclosure to the third. So now what? Well, the best way that I always tell students is go down the scale and start going up these arpeggios, and after the arpeggios, go down the scale to the next arpeggio and try to connect them all together now. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is an exercise that kind of develops everything we just talked about in one really long line. Okay, remember, this does not mean that you have to only play it in this order, but it's a good way to practice this. So let me go to that. See if I can find that. There. Okay. I'll make it a little bit smaller here. Okay, so you should be seeing on screen. Again, if for any reason you're not, you just let me know. I notice there's no questions yet, which is good. So you can probably see that. It should be a long line with some coloring. And the reason I did that was I'm going to show you how I'm just taking my G7 bebop scale. I'm descending on the 1. I'm going all the way down. And look at, I'm putting an enclosure to the third, and I'm still going down the scale after that. I'm coming all the way down, and I'm going to do it again an octave lower, an enclosure to the third. And then I'm going to go up my arpeggio of the third and come back down the scale again to the fifth arpeggio. I'm going to go back up the arpeggio, and I get to do an enclosure over here to the third. I go down the scale, the bebop scale, to the seventh now. I'm going up the arpeggio of the seventh, coming down the scale, quick little enclosure to the third, going up the third arpeggio, which is just an octave that we did before, going down the scale. Oh, now I go to the seventh, and I'm inverting my arpeggio, and it goes right away to the fifth, inverting that arpeggio on the fifth, and first inverted on the third, and I end. In this way, this exercise, I'm dealing with everything I just talked about. The only change is that I'm starting on the 1. I didn't start on any other scale degree. You could, and that's something that I would do, is start on the 4th this next time and see what happens. So take a listen. See if I can, I don't have any music in front of me, but I know that I'm going to be going down the scale all the way down to the third, right? And every time I go to the third, I'm doing an enclosure now. So I got that in my head. Once I get down to the lowest octave for me, I'm going to go up my arpeggio. I'm going to go down the scale to the next arpeggio would be the 5th. I'm going to enclose around the 3rd again, get to the 7th, go all the way up to the 3rd again, and then as soon as I get all the way up there again, I'm going to invert all of my arpeggios in a row. See if I can do that. I'll go super slow the first time. Okay, so that was all the way through the whole phrase. I felt like I added maybe one, maybe not. I think I did that all correct. Okay, so that would be my practice, and I'm making sure that I'm applying everything that we just talked about with my arpeggios. I'm going down the scale after the arpeggios. I'm using my enclosure. This is a great practice just in general. And then you start to pick it up. There you go. Now, eventually, you can start anywhere. Remember, this is not a rule that you have to start and do this exercise and that's how you play it. It's just a good practice tool, right, for everything that you added. But then start anywhere. So let me do that. I'll start on the second of G7 and I'll just go down to the third arpeggio and I'll go down to the fifth and then I'll stop. And again, this is going to become like this endless amount of material that you're going to be able to add. And that's great. Okay, so now moving on. So hopefully that all made sense over Zoom. It's really hard sometimes to know if this is organized. But I'm going to move on to the major bebop because we want to learn how to go to the major bebop and to what to do there. So then we can connect the two. Okay, so that is the next step. So here we are now learning how to descend. Remember, not ascend on this, but descend on the major bebop scale. And just a reminder, you're adding a note to your major scale. You're adding the flatted six. Again, why? Because then you will play on the beat the chord tones, the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 6th. Okay, take a listen to that scale on the 1. So I'm practicing all octaves that I can play, putting that together on the 1. Notice I'm keeping all my eighth notes straight, slurring down. Okay, now there are rules again on how to play on every scale degree. It's super important that you learn that as well. It's not too far off from what you just did with the dominant. So let me run through that. Checking the time. I got plenty of time. I'm going to make this happen. I promise. I'm going to get everything in today. Okay, starting on the 7th, you're going to go down the 7th. Well, same kind of situation. To make you land on the beat, you have to add a chromatic note with the 7th on the major bebop scale. So that will, in C major, that would be B flat or A sharp, however you want to think. And that would sound like this. Easy. You got it. Notice it's all chromatic notes all the way through in the first 4 notes. So that's kind of nice. Starting on the 7th. Going on the 6th, you don't have to change anything. That is a chord tone, believe it or not, for our C. So we don't do anything, just add that flatted 6. Okay, and you can go down an octave. Okay, all right, now starting on the 5th, that's a chord tone. We don't have to change anything to the scale. Okay, starting on the 4th, just like the dominant, we have to put a chromatic note because we have a half step happening. So we add this, a chromatic note. We have to add a rhythm to this on the 4th. And just like the dominant, we have to add a rhythm. And we're going to add triplets, eighth note triplets on the 4th to get back on the beat of the 3rd of C major. Okay. So far on the 7th, the fourth, and then you'll notice on the second. Those are the only three that you have to worry about on the major. The chord tones, you don't have to change anything. So for an example, we're going to go to the third again on C major. We don't have to change anything for the scale, just the flatted 6 added. All right, going to the last one, which is the second, or you could call it the ninth, and we have to add a chromatic note again to get back on the beat. So practice, starting on the 1, starting on the 7th, adding your chromatic note. Okay, starting on the 6th. Okay, starting on the 5th. Starting on the 4th, rhythmically change. Third. And last but not least, the second, and add your chromatic note right away. Okay. Now, in your major bebop scale, you also have arpeggios that we can play. And we're going to go to that now. So let's see if I can find that. All right, here we go. Okay, so for our major bebop, it's a little different than our dominant. We can play our arpeggio on the 3rd or the 5th. Not the 7th, but the 3rd or the 5th. And we do some unique things with the 5th. Let's get to the 3rd first. On the 3rd, if you, just like the arpeggios, it's 4 notes. And in this case, again, it's based in thirds, and it's E, G, B, D, based off of C major. Okay, so take a listen. Okay, if I go down the scale from the 1 and I go all the way to the 3rd and go up that arpeggio in the major bebop, it would sound like this. You can do a repetitive thing. After the arpeggio, go back down the scale. All right. Now, same thing. You get to invert this, and you're just taking the first note and playing it up an octave. That's all it is. It just kind of gives it a unique change of phrase. Instead of so I started with the first inversion of the 3rd arpeggio in the major bebop, and then I went down the scale to the 3rd and went up the regular arpeggio. Okay, cool. All right, so practice all scale degrees to the 3rd. Not just on the 1 going down, but start them all. Let's start on, how about the 7th? Remember the 7th, I have to do a chromatic note right away on the major bebop. I'm going to go down to the 3rd, up the arpeggio. Now, for me to play first inversions, sometimes you have to play higher in your octaves in your instrument. So that's a good way to practice, and it'll help you reach different octaves for you. All right, moving on to the 5th. The 5th is a special. I kind of just said special inversion on the 5th. Okay. In this case, it's still 4 notes. It's just dealing with it a little differently. It's inverted special for this. So on the 5th of C major is G, and notice it goes G down to the 7th, and then it goes up to the 1 and then to the 4. So it's 5, 7, 1, 4. That sounds like this. See what that sounds like when I put my scale descending to the 5th. So how about I start on the 1 again, and I'll get to the 5th and play this special inversion. Now, my last note is an upbeat, and it's on the 4th, and you're going to naturally go down to the 3rd. And so if I was on the 3rd of C major, I get to play my arpeggio. So back to back, the 5th arpeggio, special one, and the 3rd. That sounds like this. Sorry. So that's back to back, the 5th and the 3rd arpeggio. So let's play the scale starting on the 1 again to the 5th and the 3rd arpeggio. Pretty cool sounds. What if I took the 3rd instead of played it up on my arpeggio? I invert that arpeggio. So take a listen. That's the 5th, the special inversion, and then the 3rd inverted inversion. Okay, excellent. And I notice I added the scale to get to the 5th that last time. All right, last thing on the major bebop that we get to do is another enclosure on the 3rd again, just like the dominant. So rules aren't too far off. On this case, same scenario. We get to go a whole step below the 3rd and chromatically up to get to the 3rd. So if I was to play the scale descending on the 1, I would go all the way to the 4th again, down, and then whole step below the 3rd. So take a listen. I'll go super slow for this one. Again, just completely adds a little bit of like an embellishment in this case. So once I get to the 3rd, I could go up the arpeggio. Could I play that right after the 5th special inversion? Yeah, take a listen what that sounds like. Okay, so you're getting the idea that it's pretty close to the dominant in some ways. I practiced my descending of the scale. I practiced my arpeggios, my enclosure. All right, now putting a line together on the major bebop. Let me find that real quick for you guys. There we go. All right, make it a little smaller here. So I'm just putting together some of the ideas we just talked about. I'm starting right off the bat with the first inversion on the 3rd of C major. I'm going down the bebop scale. When I get to the 5th, I'm doing my special inversion, and I'm doing an enclosure to the 3rd again, going up the arpeggio here, going down the bebop scale to the 5th, again, special inverted 5th, enclosure to the 3rd, and now first inversion. All together, that sounds like this. All right, I had to read that one. I wasn't memorizing that one yet. Okay, so that's a lot right now that I just mentioned, but now I got to get to combining the two together to form some nice bebop phrases that fit over chord progressions, and that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to take one measure, I call them segments, of a G7 and combine it with a one measure C major bebop idea. Okay. I do have them written out on starting on every single scale degree. So let me go to that first. And we're not going to do that just for time purposes, but I'm going to show you how this is G7, and I made ideas starting on each scale degree, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7. Okay, I'm going to pick, I'll pick 2 today. Okay, I'll start on the 1 of G7. And notice I'm going down the scale and I get to the 7th and I go up the arpeggio and I go down 2 notes. This is just a 1 measure little segment of G7, dominant bebop scale. Starting on the 1, it sounds like this. So again, just a reminder, going down the bebop scale to the 7th, up the arpeggio of G7, and down 2 notes of the scale. I can remember that. I think I could do that in every key, possibly, if I knew the rules like that. Okay, I'll do one more, like I said. I'll start on the 2nd of G7. And notice on the 2nd, I have to add that chromatic note as a reminder, right? Go down to the bebop scale to the 7th, and then just go up the arpeggio, and that's it for 1 measure. Okay, has a little change to it. Cool. I can work that out in those 2. I can memorize that. Okay, that's G7. I want to go on to the next measure, and I'm going to treat that as like going to the 1. How do I connect that? So take a look at the first one. I go all the way to my last note, which is an upbeat. It's a C in G7, right? I told you that it has a pull to go down. Most of these scales go down. Well, if I go down from C and I'm going to hit into C major, I would hit the 7th, which is B. Okay. Well, I wrote down some bebop scale patterns in C. So let me go to that. I think I did. There we go. All right. So in this case, I have some 1 measure segment starting on each scale degree here in C major. And let's find the 7th. What did I do for the 7th? I have going down chromatically, and I go to the 5th, and I skip to the 3rd. So let's listen to how that sounds. All right, so I'm going to go to the combinations of my G7, and I have a sheet for you for that. There we go. So I'm going to start where, well, in this case, I started on the 2nd, so sorry about that. Here is G7, and I'm going to start, I think I have one more. Hold on, I think I did write that out. Make more sense for you guys. Aha, there we are. Okay, starting on the 1. Now remember, I mentioned, isn't G7 the same as D minor? So I'm going to treat that as D minor here now, starting on the 1 of G7, but it's over D minor. What's my next phrase? I get to go into the next measure. Sorry, I lied. This is not the 1. Okay, never mind. Going back to that sheet. I knew I was going to have one moment of confusion. All right, I'm going to go back. Here is this measure right here. I'm going to start on the 2nd of G7, and I'm going to go down to the 7th, up the arpeggio. In G7, I want to connect it to my major. Well, here's my major starting on the 9. That's my major segment, which is written out on that one scale sheet that I have. So now listen to how that works together over a 2, 5, 1. Now I said 2, 5, 1. Well, this whole measure right here is really just G7, but it fits over D minor. So it could be a D minor, G7, and it all works. and then I'm landing into the 1. Here's another one. Okay, I'm going to do I'm playing my G7 in this measure, and I'm going to apply my first inversion on the 5th arpeggio, first inversion on the 3rd arpeggio of G7. What does that sound like again? Okay, I got that memorized. I can do that, but I need to connect. What's the note I'm going to go to? Well, it looks like I go to the 5th of C major, and here's one measure segment or an idea to play in C major, and that's the special 5th inversion, enclosure to the 3rd. Put that together, and here it is. We could do this all day, honestly, with putting these little segments together. And you're going to find how everything connects from your dominant to your major seamlessly because you know how to start on every scale degree. Okay, below here, notice the 2 and the 5 and the 1 have separate measures now instead of just the 2, 5, and 1 measure. So in this case, I'm starting on the 2nd again of G7, applying it over D minor. And I'm starting on the 2nd, doing the same thing, and go down to the 7th up the arpeggio. Well, I go down, that's going to connect to the 5th of G7. What am I doing there? I'm going to play my first inversion on the 5th, first inversion on the 3rd. So that's a long line in 2 measures already. That is G7 altogether, but it fits over D minor and G7. So let's just play that so far. All right, I need to land a C major. Well, it looks like I'm going to land on 5th again, and I'm going to play that special inverted arpeggio and then an enclosure to the 3rd. So I'm going to put that all together now like this. All right, I have my piano here. Let me see if I can play one-handed here, a 2-5-1, so you can hear how that sounds. So that's the 2, that's the 5, that's the 1. Listen to how that last line I just played fits over that. Beautiful stuff. And it's all possible for you to understand, these, I call them segments, these 1 measure ideas within G7 to connect to C major, to form some very, very beautiful phrasing that you're going to you could open up any transcription book in the Charlie Parker to Clifford Brown or, Dexter Gordon, and you're going to say, hey, that's exactly what they were doing. It is. It's absolutely the things that they were doing, connecting their dominant bebop scale to their major bebop scale. All right. It looks like I got seriously 4 minutes left. Now, the next step is practicing. Notice I'm in 1 key. Obviously, that's good for your practice to start in 1 key and understand learning the review all the scale degrees descending on the dominant bebop scale, review all the scales descending on the major bebop scale, review the arpeggios in the dominant and major, review the enclosure, add the practice of just playing a dominant, utilizing all of that. Same thing with the major. And then take 1 measure ideas based in G7 and play. You can make your own. I'm going to be sending this PDF in the lesson. and you can take one and practice it and how to connect that one to the major. So G7 to C major. And once you have that, the next step that I'm going to say after that is to practice a minor third up from where you're at. So in this case, if I was in G7, I would practice the next key, B flat 7. And then I would go a minor third up from B flat 7. And I would go to D flat 7. And then I would go a minor third up from there to E7. There's a reason behind this. And I'll leave it this way because this will be my next lesson on this. How to approach your tritone substitution utilizing your dominant bebop scale. So last but not least, this is kind of like a, extra credit moment. If you took G7, what is the tritone away from G7? It's D flat 7. D is in dog, D flat 7. And you can practice substituting the D flat over G7, and that causes this tension and release to the major. And again, this is a seamless, effortless, once you learn how to do this, to combine the two together. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to start on the second of G7 and play one measure going up the arpeggio after that on the 7th. That's in G7. Well, I'm going to go and start on the second of D flat 7, and that's E flat. Listen to how I put that together. Okay, I'm going to resolve to C major. Well, that note I'm going to resolve to makes sense to go to B, which is the 7th of C major, and I'm going to do my little segment. So I just played G7, D flat 7, C major. Why? Because it's cool. No, it's because it has some very unique tension notes to release to C major. Now, that'll be another lesson we'll talk about. So, all right, I hope you are doing well, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson. As a reminder, my new album, Discover, is coming out, and they call it dropping on Friday, October 21st. And I'm super excited about it. You can go to my website and go to the music, and you can download digitally or order a CD through Bandcamp right now, but it'll be on all the main streaming platforms on Friday, October 21st. And it's already getting some really nice reviews, and it is in Downbeat Magazine this month of October. So, all right, enjoy the practice, and if you have any questions, please email me or send it to the Patreon page for the messaging there. Okay? All right. Happy Saturday. Take care.